But they held this ball, and one of the lots that was up for auction, which was found out by one of my colleagues, Mikey Smith, was tickets for Magic Mike Live, which, if anyone doesn't know, is basically a male strip show in London. The only thing that I think is a good thing is this is a lot that was not involving members of the Tory cabinet. I think if that was the case, you definitely get no bids at all. It's hotting up outside. I'm not sure the election campaign is hotting up, but we're now in the final straight, the final few days of the campaign.
Yeah, it's been making me reflect on past elections and this stage, the final week, the final push. And the final 24 hours is always really frenetic. A lot of big blitz on visits, and it's all very kind of exciting, but also quite surreal and strange. And I was thinking back to 2017, the Theresa May campaign. And because I was on that battle bus, we started the day at 5 a.m. at Smithfield Market, which for anyone who's not familiar is a meat market. So you have to have a bit of a strong
Dead
stomach.
Carcasses, blood.
Yeah, you're bleary eyed. You've just woken up and you're confronted by lots of lovely, hanging carcasses. Anyway, we walked through that market with Theresa May. That there are butchers all over the place with their white smocks covered in blood. And poor Theresa May is trying to make conversation, and one particularly bloody butcher shouts, "Vote Labour," and some others boo. So that was how the day started. But because you do so many visits in a day in the last day, and then you have to be up early the next day to watch the leader you're following go and vote, whichever party you're with sorts out some accommodation and the travel and all that to get you there. And so on the Tory bus was me, a Snapper, I think one or two people from TV. And we ended up at a very last minute booking. They were struggling to find somewhere to put us. And so we ended up being really upgraded into this very swanky hotel. And we were all really, really delighted. It'd only been open a few weeks, and we arrived. It was all very swish. And we got to our rooms separately, I just want to add. And I walked in, and there's this big table, no rubbishy minibar for us. It was each room has a big table full of every kind of bottle of alcohol you could ever wish to have. Huge bed, all beautifully decorated, really nice. And but I was only there for 4 hours, so I didn't have a chance to really take advantage of any of the facilities. And I opened my wardrobe to hang up my clothes, just like spring up in the morning, all ready, everything nicely hung up. And I found this little parcel, so I opened it. What is this? And it was a bondage pack, complete with a whip. So, that's where the Tories chose to put us on our final night. Make of that what you will.
I don't really know what to say about that. I'm John Stevens, political editor of The Mirror.
And I'm Sam Lister, political editor at The Express.
And this is The Division Bell.
At this stage in the campaign, we've heard everything the party leaders want to tell us over and over and over again. So we're just in the repetition phase, unlikely to hear anything new when it comes to policy. But what is new is the betting issue. That has been a news story that has kind of dominated the last days.
It's a total disaster for Rishi Sunak. He's obviously had all the issues in the campaign, whether it was the rain on the first day or the Titanic or D-Day, and this just feels like another one. And a lot of it is not actually his fault. It's people who were working for him went out and it seems took bets on when the election date was going to be. But Rishi Sunak seems really struggling to shrug it off. And I think partly that is because there isn't much else new coming out in the news for people to talk about.
It's one of those, isn't it? Actually, it's quite that only a very, very small number of people actually knew that date. And there's lots of wild suggestions flying around about hundreds of people have been involved. Well, actually, lots of people in Parliament. There was a surge in the betting the day before the election was called. Well, the day the election was called, it was the very last day possible to call the election before summer recess. So if you are in Westminster and you do know your stuff, everybody's looking to see if there's any unusual activity. Now, that's a kind of blurred line, isn't it? Of actually, if you're a journalist in Westminster, for example, and you think, hang on a minute, usually those people take my calls, but they've stopped picking up. Ordinarily, we would have X on this day, and that's not happening. So, you can just kind of deduce that something's afoot and think, oh, well, I'll put a few quid on that. I don't know if that's breaking the rules. I mean, is that just using your expertise or whatever? I think, but clearly those people who have been named so far are far closer to the process. So there are definitely questions to ask.
But they must be kicking themselves. I mean, some of them, it sounds like they put very small amounts on. They weren't set to gain massively financially, but they did it in their own names, despite being connected to the Prime Minister. And surprise, surprise, they've been caught out, and it's just a bit of a mess.
You lose your reputation for the sake of a few £100, and that's just foolish. I mean, that just really is. And I think actually when you speak to Conservative MPs, that they are furious about this because it's just something else for them to have to defend on the doorstep. And they really are very angry about it. And one's told me that they've just stopped reading any national coverage of the election and that they're completely just focused on what's happening locally. And I think that actually that is a sentiment that is shared quite across the party.
I think the problem that Rishi Sunak's got is that this gamble gate, as it seems to be called now, feeds into this sense that the Tories are tired after 14 years, that maybe 14 years is too long for one party to be in government, that time's up really and it's time for kind of a clean broom to come in and sort things out.
It's just the last thing he needed. It's the last thing any of the Tory MPs needed. And I think, it's really difficult to deal with. The one thing I would say is that because of the people who have been named are basically only known in their own households, that they are not big names. They are not people that anybody outside of Westminster would know. I think that is the one kind of thing that is slightly helpful to the Prime Minister in this. If it was a big cabinet minister figure, that really would be a problem.
And we talk about how the parties have announced everything they're going to announce. They're basically at the stage where they go back and find things in the manifesto that maybe didn't get the coverage they thought it should deserve and start talking about them again. But it does just feel the Tories could do with something in the next few days if they're going to have any chance of kind of winning back some support. They do need some sort of announcement or to land some kind of catastrophic attack on Keir Starmer.
Yeah, I think that clearly the strategy is to keep hammering tax, and I think that is having a bit of cut through. Voters do seem to be talking about that. That is working for them to an extent, so I think they will just keep relentlessly hammering that. Also migration. Now, clearly there is a difficult record, but the Prime Minister can say, he can say he cut the numbers by a third, and, you can cut it however you want, but he has got a message to sell there, and he has got Rwanda to talk about.
The numbers have gone up massively.
They have gone up massively.
Up to, what is it, 600 and something thousand?
Yeah, the legal migration, which is partly fueled by, obviously, circumstances in Hong Kong and Ukraine, which obviously is about Britain being a compassionate nation and all that kind of stuff. So, but on the small boat side of it, I think they are very keen to sell this message that in Calais, the people smugglers are very keen to see Keir Starmer in there because...
Well, wait for Keir Starmer. We've literally got hundreds of people crossing every week. They don't need to wait for Keir Starmer. They're quite happy with Rishi Sunak.
But we saw actually the number of migrants who shifted over to Dublin via Northern Ireland just as the legislation was making its final passage through Parliament. And so it did resonate with migrants. They did suddenly start to think, oh, actually, I could be on one of those flights. And they headed to Dublin, and they said that part of the reason was Rwanda, and actually the Irish government said the same. So, that is the point of Rwanda. It is a deterrent. It's not supposed to be a policy where everybody who arrives here goes to Rwanda. It's supposed to be about putting off people from ever actually coming here. So you can have that argument. But yeah, I think they probably could do with something else. I think Rishi Sunak has, despite the many things that have kind of hit the campaign, I think this week he has seemed more fired up. It's good to see a bit of passion. And I think he will try and keep that energy up for the next week.
Farage has obviously got loads of attention in this campaign. We've talked before about how he was the unexpected element. He was the person we didn't expect to be really involved in this general election, and clearly has become big part. But he's made a massive mistake this week, hasn't he, in that interview with Nick Robinson in the BBC, where he talked about how Ukraine had kind of provoked, or the West had provoked, the war in Ukraine.
Yeah, he's blaming NATO, he's blaming the EU, and I mean, let's be clear, NATO, there's been no NATO expansion for 2 decades, so I think that doesn't really stack up. Yeah, I mean, this has always been the weak spot for Nigel Farage, and actually it has. People I've talked to outside Westminster in the last few days who are reform sympathetic really have been really put off by this. But that they are people who are very tuned into what's going on. Actually, how many people across the nation really have taken that message in? That I think that is a different thing. I'm not sure it has really cut through with all reform voters.
I think the problem, though, is that it was an interview on the BBC, was it 7 o'clock on Friday
night.
So there's still quite a lot of people who are going to be watching that slot. And the one thing that people have been pretty united on in this country, and united across political parties, is the support for Ukraine. You know, obviously people took in Ukrainians in their homes. We see Ukrainian flags flying kind of outside village halls around the country. And I think that people will listen to what Nigel Farage say that and just think, well, it's not the West's fault that Putin invaded Ukraine. That was the decision by Putin. It feels, for someone who is quite good often at kind of feeling what the public mood is and tapping into things, it feels like it was a massive error for him, that he's totally out of step with what people think. And the last few days, he just seems to be going berserk on social media, really just hitting out at anyone he can, getting into fights with Boris Johnson, getting into fights with different newspapers, that I almost think that shows that he realises he has made a mistake here.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think the reaction to newspapers covering what he said is interesting, because you can't blame newspapers for writing down and printing what he has said. They are his words. He talks about, in the past, admiring Vladimir Putin, admiring his leadership style. Well, you know, we're a patriotic nation, and Russia at this time is the enemy. And I don't think actually that goes down well. And although he said it a while ago, he didn't disassociate himself from that at all in this interview. So I think it is a problem for him. There is one thing, though. There is a little bit corner of the internet, a little conspiracy corner on the internet, where these types of views do actually do quite well. And so from that point of view, but are these people actually the ones who are going to go out and vote for you? I think most reform voters are disgruntled Tories who actually are really proud of what we've done. And actually really proud of Boris Johnson and how he handled that, how he led the way. And at a time when people were saying, oh, Britain's role in the world is diminished, you've left the EU, so you're nothing anymore. And Boris Johnson showed the world that that just really isn't true. And so I think it's I don't think it's great for Nigel Farage.
I think there's one thing that's gone well for the Tories, one kind of glimmer of hope is that they do want to win back some of those reform voters, that they want to push this kind of message that people should vote tactically. And so far, it seems like people haven't been listening to that. He's obviously used that message time and time over again. Rishi Sunak's used the message that if you vote for reform, you'll end up with Keir Starmer as Prime Minister, and that doesn't seem to have had any impact at all. The support for reform has gone up and up and up. And the Tories do have a challenge with tactical voting at this election. I was talking to a Tory the other day who was saying that I think this will be the tactical voting election. And I questioned that and said, why do you think that is? Is it because we've now got the internet and people find it easier to check out the voting in their seats, and we've got all these polls showing seat by seat what it is? And they were saying, well, they think it's actually more than that. I think at this election, for people who don't want to vote Tory, they really do have a motivation to get the Tories out after 14 years. And so if you're a Lib Dem supporter, a Green supporter, a Labour supporter, you will do anything you can really to do that, which is obviously very helpful for the Labour Party and parties on that side. And last time in 2019, the Tories had Brexit, and they said, we need to come together on this side of the argument to save Brexit, and you may want to vote for Nigel Farage or whoever, but you need to back Boris Johnson if you want to get Brexit done. And this time they don't have such a clear message to give to voters on that side of the argument.
No, that's true. But I think the Boris Johnson element is actually quite fascinating because, essentially these are two silverbacks who are
very unsightly.
Who almost have actually laid off each other because they recognise that the other is a powerful and popular force in politics. And so, if you respect your enemy as an equal, then you kind of stand off a bit, don't you? And actually now they are taking each other on. And I think that's quite an interesting development. Boris Johnson, all the way through this campaign, has held off. Obviously, he has a regular newspaper column. He has a big social media profile. He could have made an intervention at an earlier stage about Nigel Farage. I think he didn't for tactical reasons, but I think it got to a point where actually once you've started going down the Russia route, he just could not hold back anymore. And then you see Nigel Farage come back and now they're locked in this big scrap. Now, I think obviously Farage is fighting really hard because he is absolutely desperate to win that seat and win more seats than just his seat in Clacton. But Boris Johnson is still really popular with a big contingent of voters. And they are the voters that Nigel Farage is targeting. So I don't know if going for Boris Johnson really is the best tactic.
We're in the final straight. What is your moment of the week?
My moment of the week is J.K. Rowling and her article setting out step by step why she feels Labour has abandoned women. And I think it's important because often in this debate, and it is a complicated debate that raises a lot of strong feelings, but often it is dismissed as a culture war. J.K. Rowling is of the left. She's an ex-Labour Party donor, so her views on this cannot easily be dismissed. And I think she's doing a great service for women.
I think it's quite interesting. The Labour response to J.K. Rowling has been they haven't really hit back at her. They've been we respect her. She's obviously someone who has been an important figure for the Labour Party. And I think it's quite interesting that Keir Starmer's actually said, it's important to listen to her and they'd be quite willing to meet her.
So what's your moment of the week?
Well, my moment of the week is the Tories held their summer ball and they've been struggling to raise money. You look at the figures of how much money is coming in, and usually it's the Tories that have all of this cash piling in. They raise the spending limits of how much parties could spend, but it doesn't feel like they're going to be able to get up to it because suddenly their donors have decided there's better things to spend their money on than a losing election campaign. But they held this ball, and one of the lots that was up for auction, which was found out by one of my colleagues, Mikey Smith, was tickets for Magic Mike Live, which, if anyone doesn't know, is basically a male strip show in London. And I would just love to know, how on earth did those tickets end up as one of the lots in the auction? I mean, usually the lots in the auction is kind of afternoon tea with Priti Patel, or I don't know, tennis or dinner with Mel Stride, although maybe I'm not sure there'd be a massive list of people trying to bid for that. The only thing that I think is a good thing is this is a lot that was not involving members of the Tory cabinet. I think if that was the case, you definitely get no bids at all.
Well, we started with bondage packs and we've ended with strippers. So I think we might have to put an 18 rating on this episode.
If you want to get in contact with us about those or anything else, email us thedivisionbell@reachplc.com and we'll be back on Thursday.
Bye for now.
Thank you for listening. This is a Reach Studio production hosted by myself, John Stevens, and Sam Lister. Produced and edited by Lydia O'Malley and Shabir Nuzai. Our researcher is Sheila Mahmoodi, and designs have been done by Curtis Phillips-Cozier and Luke Stidson. Audio managed by Matt Millard and social content managed by Gully Burrows and Ed Washington. Content production and design overseen by Yara Silver, Harry Dumanel and Spencer Robotham.